Welcome back to Keto and Crime and Thought Crime. Today I have part 2 of Chad Daybell's The Great Gathering, Book 1 in the Standing on Holy Ground series. I would also like, before we get started, to of course thank my channel members and my patrons. Without you, this channel would be a lot harder to do. If you would like to join my channel members or my patrons, we have a lot of cool stuff going on. I promise you there will be a chat this month. October got away from me, but I promise you before Thanksgiving I will schedule that hangout again, and I apologize for that. But they do get advanced access to all my videos. We do have that chat. There's free merch. There's all kinds of stuff that goes on for my channel members and my patrons. So if you'd like to join them, I'm going to link patrons down below. The channel member button is down below next to subscribe, which I urge you to check. Make sure you are still subscribed. A lot of true crime channels and commentary channels have noticed that people are being randomly unsubscribed that didn't unsubscribe themselves, so check it. And if you were never subscribed, why you torture me like that? Just subscribe. It really helps the channel, and I appreciate it. And like, comment, share. All of that good stuff. Also, if you want some really cool t-shirts or mugs with some really cool artwork on it, I'm going to link my merch right up here. It's also linked down below. Makes great Christmas gifts. And with all that aside, I'm also going to tell you about a brand new weekly series that's coming to the channel. Now, before any of you get the idea I'm going away from true crime, not at all. True crime and books associated with true crime and history will always be the main focus of this channel. You are still going to be getting 3 true crime or books related to true crime videos from me every single week, just as you always have. But later in the week, probably on Thursdays, you're going to get another video from me. So you're going to be getting 4 videos a week from me. And the name of this series is going to be called Bootstrap Warriors. And it's going to be a motivational series where I talk to people that have been through traumatic situations in their lives, and they have pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and gone on to triumph over tragedy, triumph over adversity, and even go on to build. I'm an entrepreneur, so I like to highlight other entrepreneurs. So I'm going to be talking to entrepreneurs of all races, religions, genders, that have built businesses and have succeeded, and they're going to be telling you how they did that. So it's going to be weekly motivation for you. And I think in today's world we need a little bit of happiness, a little bit of motivation. So if that sounds good to you, that will be happening every single Thursday. So look for that starting this week. And so 4 times a week we're going to be hanging out now. So with that being said, let's dive back into part 2 of The Great Gathering. So, when we last left off, we met Tad and Emma North, who are a devout Mormon family. Tad, has kind of become obsessed with this sport called Conquest. He's got a season tickets to the Salt Lake City Grizzlies that he actually named as part of a newspaper contest. Also, we met Emma's parents, Mark and Michelle, who are missionaries working on these tent communities, the Jolly Rancher camp. I love sour apple. But they are building generators and tents for when the Mormon people basically leave society and go into the mountains for the end times to prepare the celestial city for Jesus Christ's second coming. We also met Doug and Becky Barton, who are Emma's brother and wife, that are devout Mormons that are helping the church as well. And you also met Doug's wife's Becky's brother and his wife, Josh and Michelle Brown, that are now over in Guatemala. They have just rescued everyone in Guatemala from Hurricane Barton. Meanwhile, this chip has been implemented all over the United States that is now you either have it or you can't buy or sell, just like it says in Revelation. So Anyway, Tad lied to Emma, got the chip. Emma has left him, and she's just hung up on him after he refuses to reverse his decision. And then we cut back to Springville, where she's now staying with her parents. And this is where all hell breaks loose. So basically, they go to church, and they are given the call. The president of that ward, the president of wards all over the country, all over the world, are telling their congregations it's time to go to the camps. Go home, get your food, get your medicine, get your clothes, whatever you can carry. Abandon your houses, abandon your lives, say goodbye, and be back at the church by 4 p.m. where buses and 18-wheelers will pick up you and your supplies and transport you to the camps because shit's going down. Also, no one that has taken the chip may go because they don't want to be tracked. So if you have taken the chip, you need to remove that before coming back. So basically, it's kind of a mixed reception. About half of the local church goes. They had camps. Most of the camps could accommodate about 4,000 people, and only about 600 to 1,000 out of each church actually did the deed and went. In fact, they talk about when they returned for the buses and the trucks, there were people standing around laughing at them, pointing, making fun, and that the camps could accommodate so many more. And according to the companion series, the one we read last time, anybody that did not go on the first round will not be able to go to these white camps. They will instead be sent to the blue camps, which are not as nice, if they decide to remove the chip and go do what they're supposed to do. Right before they leave to go back to the church to get on a bus, she calls Tad and tells him what's happened. He, of course, did not go to church, so he doesn't know. And she urges him to pack a bag, grab what food's in their kitchen, and go to the church and get on the bus. So he does indeed walk to their local temple, their local church, and sees the buses and the trucks being loaded, but he just kind of stands around and laughs with the people that are mocking them and goes home. So they're going to the camps. And then we go to Guatemala, where they're still cleaning up. And also now there's a volcanic eruption that kind of shakes up the Guatemalan landscape. But again, Mayans, they're Mormon, they survive. We return to the Jolly Rancher camp. I'm not going to say that green apple, Joe. It's just old. But where Emma and Mark, Doug, everyone, including Emma and Tad's 3 children, are. And there's some infighting because every family was given a large tent, which in it had place for air mattress, sleeping bag, clothing storage, la-da-da. Food would be prepared communally at the pavilion, which has electricity, and everyone else had to live in a tent. Well, there's a lot of people that went that are now complaining, some of them talking about how they had perfectly good RVs. Why couldn't they bring that? Why couldn't they have their electronics? Because anyone that had snuck in a laptop or a smartphone or anything had it confiscated. And so there was a lot of people that didn't like that. And the church elders went on to try to explain that it was because they didn't want those things to be tracked. Also, that the computer that the church had given each camp was, designated free of any tracking devices or anything like that. They couldn't be sure that somebody couldn't find them, that their safety depended on being off the grid. And so there was a lot of infighting, and basically these people demanded their stuff back. And the church also said this is their way of building an equal society. Everybody has the same, and nobody knows how wealthy the other person was. If you had an RV and this person had a tent, that's causing, commotion within the campers. But eventually he tells them that they can go. They'll give them back all their stuff and they can go back to their houses, but they will not transport them there. They will have to walk because they cannot take the chance of somebody finding them, but then having a gaggle of people walk out just out of nowhere and down, because evidently God power hides these camps from the naked eye. That's going to be a little suspicious, but so basically about 10 families take their stuff and leave. And so now they're reduced from about 600 people down to about 500. And so, yeah. So then we cut back to where Emma and Doug's wife, Becky, are setting up the medical tent. And Becky says that she feels kind of ill and wonders if she might need a pregnancy test. So, yeah, she takes the pregnancy test. She's pregnant. Everyone's happy. Great. So it goes on for a few days in the camp, showing them setting up vegetable gardens. Every tent is responsible for farming vegetables. Whatever will grow in the dirt, they are supposed to grow, and then donate it to the community. People are taught to hunt, so they'll be hunting in the Rocky Mountains, looking for whatever game they can get. And the local community pavilion has power. It has LDS Zoom network connectivity where they can get messages about what's going on the outside. And so basically they busy their days setting up a one-room schoolhouse for all the kids, which Becky's in charge of because she had been an elementary school principal. Several of the women are volunteer to be teachers, but they're not teaching worldly skills anymore. There's no algebra and literature. It's mainly teaching trades. They teach people how to plumb and build, carpentry and, and I have nothing against a good trade school education. I think it's something everybody ought to look into. They taught the women how to cook and sew and clean because this is a Chad Daybell novel. And so eventually some of the children had but brought their musical instruments, and they basically convinced the president of their camp if they could possibly set up one night a week to have some music and some dancing, and they do that. And there's this whole thing where they're dancing, mimicking the Thriller music video with the dancing with band music, and it's fun, and everybody laughs and has a good time and almost forgets that the world's ending around them. So yeah, that's life at Jolly Rancher. Meanwhile, we get this overview of what's going on outside the camps. Satan has just taken over and run amok. There's sex on TV. NC-17 movies are playing during prime time. There's a lot of violence, a lot of adultery. Any church that tries to put up a fight or a protest talks about beating preachers and throwing them in jail. Basically, it's just calamity. Meanwhile, the recession had gone away temporarily because of the economic boom created by the people getting their chip money and spending it. We're on the downside of that. That's starting to fade out since everyone has the chip now and all that's kind of gone. But then we cut to Tad, who, of course, deposited his $2,000 and used it to put a down payment on a used Porsche. What kind of rickety Porsche did you put a down payment on? He's also moved out of that apartment in the suburbs and moved into a much fancier one-bedroom apartment across from his office in Salt Lake City. And he has not been back to Springville since the last time he saw Emma. So he decides, with everything, with the church people disappearing, he drives his black Porsche down to Springville and actually finds the minivan that Emma had took sitting there. And there was a note on it from Emma telling him to take it. And he laughed, threw the note away and said, "You'll be back," and went on back to his apartment. And then he decides to go to a local church in Salt Lake City. And there's a man named Larry Campbell, called in the book a religious nut, who found Jesus in prison. Just a nutbag. Chad Daybell specifically wrote he's a religious nutbag. Really, Chad? Pot. Me kettle. Really? Anyway, so this guy's proclaiming himself the new bishop. Tad rebuked him and walked out, said he would never go back to that church. Sure enough, Larry ends up back in prison, and Tad said that the church closed down. And I just sit here wondering what the hell was the point of that story. Because we never hear of these. Larry Campbell never pops up in this novel again. I mean, he might later on in the series. But what the hell was the point of that story? Anyway, So now we're in the back end of 2007, and we are sliding back into an economic recession. All the chip money's gone. There's rioting, looting, cities burning. Sounds familiar. And basically no optimism. The president thinks everything is going downhill, that there's no hope, but in public he's very optimistic. There's areas called red zones where the violence is so bad that police will just arrest whoever's on the street. Federal troops are moving in, martial law. But yet Tad is still living in his one-bedroom apartment across from his office. He got that promotion. He's making lots of money with only one person to feed. He's managed to save $10,000 in his bank account, and he's planning on hopefully getting Emma back and buying her a house. He never sold those season tickets because, of course, now he's living it up. Churches all over the country are being burned, churches of all denominations, not just Mormons. And the president is kind of in hiding, so is most of Washington with what's going on. Also, natural disasters are battering. In addition to Hurricane Barton, there's bad storms, hurricanes, tornadoes. There's a huge tidal wave created by a typhoon in California, which Tad watches on television and comments on the people that are trying to surf off of it. So, yeah. And finally, we cut back to another day in Salt Lake City, where a huge storm hits the city. It creates hail, which bashes in a lot of the buildings and destroys them, including Tad's office. He goes back to his apartment. All of his windows are broken. It's soaked. And these storms actually track across the Pacific area of the United States, regain strength over the Midwestern plains, and it basically crisscrossed the whole United States, destroying everything, especially all the crops in Kansas, Nebraska, Idaho, Illinois. All the food crops destroyed. And finally, it goes back across the Atlantic, destroys parts of Europe, and then finally fizzles over Asia. That's a hell of a storm. Pretty sure it's that same superstorm that we encountered in the first series as well. Anyway, so as a result, things get worse because now there's no time to replant crops. It's harvest time when it hits, so oops, no food for you. A food shortage across the United States and the globe by Thanksgiving. Meanwhile, go back to Guatemala, where Josh and Kim are creating villages and stakes and wards for people to live. They're sealing hundreds of people into the church every day and building a thriving Mormon community. Because remember, the Mayans, they're Mormon. Anyway, so we cut back to Tad, and he's repaired his apartment. He's back at work, but one night in the middle of the night, he has a panic attack and thinks about everything that's happening, that there's already been a run on the stores, the shelves are empty, there's no more food coming in, he only has about 2 weeks worth of food in his apartment. He panics, wondering about a run on the banks next. So he feels like he ought to go withdraw all his money. So he gets out of his bed at midnight, goes to an ATM. Of course, it will only let him withdraw $500. He goes to the bank the next day during his lunch break and is kind of given a hard time by the teller and the bank manager about withdrawing cash. And so but they give him all of his $10,000. He puts it into a briefcase and keeps it with him. He's going to take it somewhere and hide it because he says he would rather have cash in case something really does happen. So he drives down to Springville to Mark and Michelle, Emma's parents' house, and buries the suitcase in a hidden area of their living room where Emma had once told him that her and her brother Doug used to hide stuff. And it's still there. The floorboards, everything, kind of just a tiny little crack to reveal where it is. So he buries it all there and leaves. He thinks no one's ever going to find it. So the next day, he goes to work feeling much relieved, and when he gets to his office, he tries to log into his computer, and he's locked out. His password doesn't work. The secretary says that Ken needs to see him, so he goes down to Ken's office, and standing there with Ken is an agent from the CHIP detection agency, the same people that chased the girl in the Chicago apartment in the last one. That and the other novels is there. His name is Agent 𝗟𝗏𝗏. I'm sure that means something. But he basically asks him about the large withdrawal of cash he made. He explains he was just going to put a down payment on a house. And the guy says, well, congratulations, but you could have done that electronically. And then the guy just grabs Tad, throws him up against the wall, and says that we know your family's part of these religious nutbags that have fled civilization. We want to know where they are. How do I know that you don't have that cash and you're going to turn it over to these renegades? You're being watched by your chip. And so basically Ken tells him that he just go ahead and tell him where the money is, give it back, everything will be okay. So the agent says they've already searched the house in Springville and couldn't find it, so where's the money? Chad relents and says, okay, I'll take you to the money. It is hidden. He goes, the agent says, I'm going to drive you there. You're going to get the money. I'm going to drive you to your bank, and you're going to redeposit your bank into your bank. And you're going to go back to living on the grid. And Ken assures him he'll give him his job back if he does this. So they get into the agent's Porsche. Evidently being a chip agent pays really well. And they drive down to Springville. But before they get to Mark and Michelle's house, Tad jumps out of the car on the highway, jumps over an embankment, and runs away. The agent gives chase but can't catch him. He runs over a few towns. He finally finds a broken beer bottle and cuts his chip out of his hand because he doesn't want to be tracked. Bandages it rips up his jeans, bandages his hand, and basically makes it to a nearby small town. He eats old chicken McNuggets out of a McDonald's garbage can because he doesn't have any money, doesn't have a chip, he can't buy anything. So he basically sleeps in the bushes overnight, wakes up, goes to a community center where he breaks into the gym, steals somebody's sweatsuit, gym shoes, and basically rebandages up his hand. He makes it to the mountains where he hides in a cave. And Chad talks about, like, we all know the layout of Utah. I don't know where this dude is. The next day he wakes up in the cave and something tells him to exit it, so he exits it. About the time he does, 7.2 Richter scale earthquake. The same one we heard about in the first series rips through the Utah area and his cave collapses. Also, he watches the nearby cities get flattened, and that dam breaks, Beaver Dam, the same one that broke in the first one, breaks, and the whole area is flooding. He sees people swept out of their houses. He sees all kinds of stuff. And Tad has the audacity to offer thanks to God. Thank you for saving me. That's like thanking the bank robber for shooting your neighbor and not you. So this earthquake and this flood hit all of the West. Las Vegas Strip is leveled. All kinds of stuff. And so basically, but all the camps are okay, just minor damage. And they use the Zoom technology network to communicate. Everything's okay. But like I said, Las Vegas is leveled, Reno's leveled, most of California is leveled. There's now a huge water shortage in California, but nothing new there. Poor California always has water shortages. There's now one in Nevada. Huge death toll in Vegas. Doug's wife, Becky, her parents were on their way to the camp from Las Vegas, and she has not heard from them since. She's very upset, no sign of them. And yeah. Also, now that all this flooding has happened with the food shortages and now millions of people dead, martial law has indeed taken over. And anybody without a chip that the government can't track is now considered a terrorist, and people without chips are being rounded up. They're being put into basically prison camps. There's one in the copper mine west of Salt Lake City. They don't feed these people. They evidently just put them in a big old pit and throw food and water in. The guards watch them fight over it. Anybody that won't fight for food eventually dies. And basically there was enough people dying every day, the guards would just drive a dump truck to the pit, load up the bodies, and then force the other prisoners to bury them along the hills next to the copper mine, now called Mormon Hill, because of all the Mormons buried there, because it was mainly Mormons that would not take the chip. So, Jolly Rancher Camp has started to explore the area because their next mission is to move to the Manti camp and hook up with those men from Manti. Remember them from the other novels? And basically, David, who is Tad and Emma's oldest, is a mechanical genius, and he's found some old golf carts that he's able to take apart and repurpose to make new carts. Meanwhile, we cut back to Tad, who manages to make his way to Springville to Mark's house. He gets inside. It has been flood damaged, but he made his way down to the cellar, into the cracks in the wall where he hid the money, and it's been basically covered with mud. So Mark moves around and finds, like, where they used to keep stuff for their bar, I guess. I don't know. And he finds 2 jars of maraschino cherries, which he eats, and basically tries to use the maraschino cherry jars to dig through to find the money, because he figures it might can get him enough cash to bribe a doctor to take care of his hand, which is getting infected. So while he's there eating maraschino cherries and trying to dig through the slop, he sends a prayer up asking God to help him. And, of course, back at Jolly Rancher Camp, when they're leaning up to go to Manti, of course, God tells them, go to Mark's house. Go to Mark's house, because that's how it works. And Becky and Emma and indeed head for her parents' house. And, of course, she finds her husband, and they hug, they embrace, it's all good, and she helps him dig through the muck and finds the cash, which they take out of the briefcase and put into Ziploc bags, put into a backpack, put it on Tad's back. She says they will get them medical attention when they get to Manti, but they have to get to Manti. I guess it's a day's walk. I don't know. They also take whatever food's left in the kitchen that's not spoiled, and they head out. Meanwhile, we took to Ken, who is Tad's former boss, in his office. They're watching a TV broadcast where all the OPEC countries have vowed never not to sell oil to any American or American allies anymore. Embargo. And so now oil prices are skyrocketing. There's a run on the gas stations. It's bad. Ken realizes his business is going to crash since he deals largely with the transportation industry, and it's just riding at high prices. Meanwhile, we cut to some devious Middle Easterners who are part Russia, the Middle East, even Saudi Arabia, along with China, because this is a Chad Daybell novel, and all that stuff. Are called the coalition. The same coalition we heard about in the first novel is the same coalition we're going to hear about in this novel, which I don't understand because we already read the other one and we know how it ends. They beat them, but now we're going to have to go through it again. Anyway, the oil embargo is just a way of them solidifying the destruction of the United States, and 300 Russian and Chinese warships have departed for the USA. Each soldier on board has been promised a house of his own in the United States if they help them eradicate all of the Americans, and they are more than ready to do it. They're all just deciding whether they want a cattle ranch or a house or an apartment or whatever they want. But basically they have tanks, they're ready to go, and just like in the first novels, they approach the Pacific coast of the United States and go through Southern California, wiping out city after city as they invade. They're not allowed to use guns. They want to save them in case there's armed assailants, but they're given swords, and they are told to kill any American that they see, man, woman, or child. There will be no prisoners. They are here to eradicate all Americans. Meanwhile, the president, of course, is cowardly gone into hiding, as has most of the government, if they haven't already pretty much surrendered. The only difference here in the first set of novels, you remember they sent UN peacekeepers under a peacekeeping guise that started separating people into work camps and death camps. That seems to have been skipped here, unless that was happening somewhere else. I don't know. And we're just straight up invasion, but this is what's happening. And basically, lots of turmoil. The president is afraid to counterattack because we have troops all over the world and we're stretched thin at home. He won't attack from the rear because he's afraid it'll cause a nuclear attack. His generals advised him to please attack. He won't. And so now we're in real trouble, y'all. So basically now these warships start firing missiles. They level New York. They level LA. They level every major city just about. Meanwhile, the camps, people are leaving the camps. They're heading toward other camps, and they're starting to kind of unify and bridge up. These people that left Jolly Rancher are now trying to get to Manti. Meanwhile, Tad and Emma are trying to get to Manti. It's just a big old rush on Manti. Meanwhile, we cut back to Guatemala long enough to find out from Kim, Josh's wife, who can see beyond the veil. Yeah. Anyway, she now finds out that Becky's parents were killed on their way from Las Vegas to the camp when their truck was knocked off the road by the earthquake. So they're dead. Sorry, Becky. And so basically, everybody's converging toward Manti, at least our heroes, while the world is collapsing around us. Tanks, missiles, trucks full of soldiers that are slashing people up with swords. And finally, the main group from Jolly Rancher makes it to Manti. And the book ends with Tad and Emma trying to get there with death and carnage all around them. And that's The Great Gathering by Chad Daybell. Another perky, uplifting story. And I'll be back next week with the second novel in this series. We're going to power through this, folks. And I will keep doing this until you tell me to stop. So it's all on you. Anyway, I love you. I love you all. And I will see you again soon. 𝗙𝗏𝗀𝗃.